Does the thought of hiring employees give you the heebie-jeebies? What if you have to give them negative feedback? What if there's conflict? And worst of all, what if they never leave you alone? Most introverts never add revenue-generating employees to their business because they're afraid they don't have the chops to handle being a boss. Maureen Werrbach is here today to dispel the myth that introverts aren't cut out to be managers. As an introvert with a team of 60 employees, Maureen has figured out how to make it work without burning herself to a crisp. If you haven't met Maureen before, she's a group practice owner, business consultant, and author of the groundbreaking book, The Accountability Equation: Bridging the Gap in Accountability and Impact, where she dives into the essential principles that underpin effective leadership and business management within the healthcare sector. In sum, she's an expert in this space. So whether you're on the fence about hiring or already have a team you're struggling to manage, this conversation with Maureen will leave you inspired and prepared to take the next step on your leadership journey, a crucial component to becoming deeply rested as a business owner. I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Maureen Werrbach. Welcome to Deeply Rested, the podcast that helps people doing good work in the world take incredibly good care of themselves. I'm your host, retired therapist and disillusioned business coach, Megan Megginson. I'm on a mission to help people like you unlearn the rules that keep you trapped in self-doubt so that you can recover from burnout and finally become deeply rested. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and join our weekly newsletter at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. Now, it's time for the show. Hey, Maureen.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing great, and I am really looking forward to this conversation.
I'm really excited to talk about this. You know, that's my wheelhouse, and I have so much fun talking about how to create a business that has employees where you feel not overwhelmed and supported, and also creating profits, which is obviously a great bonus.
Well, it's like the point.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, before we dive in, let me tell folks listening a little more about you. So Maureen is a licensed therapist and a multi-business entrepreneur in the mental health field. She owns Urban Wellness, a large counseling group practice in Chicago, the Group Practice Exchange, a business coaching firm, and co-owns Group Practice Builders, a business-focused conference for group practice owners. Her goal in life is to help the helpers. As a helping professional herself, she knows firsthand the focus healthcare providers put on making a positive impact in the world. She also knows that many healthcare professionals put business second to boots on the ground helping in the community. That's where Maureen comes in. She helps healthcare owners learn how to successfully start and scale their businesses so that they can have a larger impact on their communities. Maureen, I am seriously so happy that you're here. You are one of the main people in my personal business orbit who models what it looks like to work successfully with teams of employees as an introverted entrepreneur. And in my experience as a group practice owner, as a business coach, I see all the time introverted entrepreneurs who are curious about hiring employees into their businesses, but they are so scared of doing it. So one distinction I want to make before we dive in is that today, when you and I are talking about employees, we're mainly going to be talking about revenue generating employees. So that means someone that you hire in your business to deliver services to clients that will then bring money into your business. So this is different than talking about an office manager or an assistant, someone who you're paying to support you. This is someone who's working with the clients directly. And I think there's different considerations that we have to think about when we're working with revenue generating employees. So, okay, Maureen, now that we've set the stage, why do you think introverted entrepreneurs are so terrified of managing people, of being the boss?
From personal experience, and I feel like this is probably something that can be generalized to most introverts. One of the things that comes up for me when I think back on my experience, because now it feels so different having so many employees, I remember feeling really nervous about um, the connection I would have to have, the constant connection I would have to have with my employees, where I'm used to kind of regenerating when I'm on my own, when I'm doing solo work, is really when I'm getting revived as a person. And I had a lot of fear that they would suck so much energy out of me that
Mhm.
it would feel like I'm in this kind of like hamster wheel where I'm just constantly going and always being kind of drained emotionally
Mhm.
versus having kind of that time to myself as a business owner to be able to regenerate. And obviously, it's a little bit of like an art to figure that out for yourself on how you can find that balance. But I think it's probably one of the biggest concerns introverts have with hiring employees and having a team of people is this need to be kind of front and center and always on and never having kind of the time to yourself to reflect and kind
Mhm.
of fill your bucket back up, so to speak.
Mm, absolutely. I don't know about you, but a fear that was really present for me when I first started hiring employees too was around conflict, and I tend to be a more conflict avoidant person. I think lots of introverts are, and we get really worried about like, oof, look, what are we going to do when people aren't performing or, I need to take action. What are your thoughts about that?
I can really relate with that as well. And interestingly enough, for myself, it wasn't something I initially thought about because I kind of had the rosy glasses on when I hired my first person, thinking, of course, I'm going to hire people that are just so amazing and
Right.
there won't be conflict, of course. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't until I actually had employees and those experiences, even at a very small level, started coming up
Mhm.
where I had, the thoughts that you were bringing up with really not wanting to engage in conflict, engaging in people pleasing behaviors to just kind of smooth everything out and keep everything calm and positive. And it took a lot of self reflection and coaching and doing my own work to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
probably a really hard thing for most introverts to really deal with is engaging in just conversation and not necessarily conflict, but I think introverts see lots of things as conflict that might not always be
Mhm.
conflict,
Mhm.
like just having a conversation with an employee about stepping up their game, right? That
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to be a conflict.
Mhm.
But for a lot of introverts, it's an uncomfortable thing and can feel like conflict. And so, um, yeah, it's definitely something that introverts have to work at.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they can, the whole thing can get derailed and they can have a business that's
Absolutely.
really kind of running them over.
Yeah, I love that reflection. Just notice what feels like conflict and ask yourself, is this conflict or is this just discomfort that
Mhm.
I'm registering as conflict? Because there's a big difference between having an uncomfortable, challenging conversation with an employee and having a conflictual interaction with an employee. I can't think of any time really that I had a conflict
Mhm.
with an employee. I've had dozens every year, uncomfortable conversations. But if you really do discern the difference between those two pieces, yeah, it might feel a lot more manageable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, through kind of self exploration, you can figure out not only whether something is conflict or not, but a lot of times, I think Radical Candor was the book that talked about this a little bit, was the idea of these uncomfortable conversations are a catalyst to growth. And so
Mhm.
I remind myself of that even now, because all these years later, I'm still uncomfortable with conflict. I'm still uncomfortable
Absolutely.
with having to have conversations
Yeah.
that are difficult, but they're easier to have because I know that I'm having the best interest of my employee. I don't want them to be failing. I don't want them to feel like they can't live up to what my expectations are. So when we have those conversations, I remind myself that yes, this is uncomfortable for me. It's going to be uncomfortable for them, but really at the bottom of it all, it's in the best interest of that employee being able to do their best work in the business, And if it's coming from that place, I know that's a positive thing, even if it's uncomfortable.
For context, Maureen, can you share with us how many employees you have at the moment?
In my group practice, I have about 50. And then in the group practice exchange business, I have 4. And then in my conferencing business, it's 3 of us.
Yeah, so that's like 60 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a massive number of employees for an introvert, for someone in small business. And so I wanted to throw that into this conversation just so the folks listening can really hear what you're saying, hear this kind of journey that you've been on. You started with just one or two or three hires in the beginning and went through a lot of these challenging learning curves and have figured out how to scale up to 60 employees through your 3 different businesses. And what we're going to do now is talk about some really actionable tips, some pro tips that you have discovered that help you manage people and maintain that work-life balance as an introverted leader. I can't wait to learn from you.
Well, I'm excited.
Let's talk first about managing employees, because I think this is the harder piece for introverts to really excel. I think maintaining work-life balance, that's easier to figure out. Managing employees, there's a big growth curve here for us as introverts, but also just as healers, right? Or as helpers, whatever business you have right now. It's unlikely you got an MBA. It's unlikely you've had any training in how to manage people. So I think just to start naming that you're at a deficit when it comes to being a manager. You aren't skilled yet in being a manager, but these are all very learnable skills. Yeah, Maureen, what are some of your top tips for folks who are just starting out in the management space?
I would suggest setting aside time every week to grow your skills in that area. So what I do, and I still do this since I started, is every Friday I have 2 hours dedicated to reading, and it's something business related. And so it's evolved over the years, but it definitely started off in the beginning reading books around people management, growing as a competent leader, communication skills. And so I think business owners in general really focus a lot of their time on the doing stuff, answering emails, hiring people, marketing, and really focus on the doing part and don't focus as much on kind of the being part, the learning, the research, the things that might not deliver something immediate or tangible. And it took a little while for me to kind of learn that the most success that I have in my businesses come not from the times that I'm doing things, hiring people, making copy, whatever. It's really when I am just sitting at my desk and either thinking, letting my creative juices kind of flow and just letting myself explore. And so my first tip would be schedule some regular time in your week. Like I said, I do Fridays. I have 2 hours of reading and 2 hours of thinking. So it's 4 straight hours. There's no end goal. I'm not going to accomplish, so to speak, a literal thing.
You're going to check something off a list.
No lists being checked off. I'm literally reading to learn to become a better business owner, leader, boss. And then the next 2 hours on letting myself just kind of explore and let my mind kind of go, right? And think about where my businesses are at, what I'm liking, what I'm not, and let that creative side of my brain go. Sometimes I come up with really cool ideas that I end up implementing later in my kind of doing stage. But sometimes it's just the idea of letting myself see, how can I envision my business going in one direction or another? And I don't normally give myself that time. And when I do, it's allowed me to really kind of settle into this business owner space. So it's kind of a long answer to my first tip, which is giving yourself time to actually read or get coaching. but something that's
Mhm.
regular and weekly and forever.
Mhm. Mhm. I
So,
think I think that is stellar advice, and it's reminding me that, a big mistake I made when I started my group practice 4 years ago was I didn't have that time built in, right? I
mhm,
hired my first person, I was still seeing a full caseload, I was doing all of this work of growing the business, and I didn't do that. I didn't have the space set aside where I was reading about management, having conversations with people, like building up this skill set. Um, and the first 2 years of my group would have been much easier had I created that space. So I think what you're saying to me feels like the foundational piece. If you can't work this into your schedule, don't hire employees yet.
right, right, exactly. And so going kind of along those lines is another tip. Um, and that is that business owners and leadership don't need to know how to do everything. We don't have the best thing a business owner can do is hire people to do the things that aren't in their own skill set. And so I'm not, I want to preface this by saying I don't think that you should not, as a business owner, learn how to have good communication skills and be able to have difficult conversations, because you do need to be able to have that. But I pretty quickly in my business growth hired someone into leadership who naturally loved having those kind of conversations,
Mhm.
so that that person could have this leadership role and do some of the things that are just naturally a little bit more difficult for me. Like I said, I want to preface this by saying we should be hiring out for things that aren't our skill set. But it doesn't mean that we
Right.
shouldn't be learning how to be. I think part of being a good entrepreneur or a good business owner is being able to have difficult conversations.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that you can't hire someone who's a
Yeah.
really good leader whose skill set is in staff management.
I think that's so important. And I totally agree. I have a practice manager now, and I intentionally looked for someone who was more extroverted because I was able to name in myself, like, oh, I'm too introverted to manage all of these people. Like, it's just, yes, I want to get better at having hard conversations. I just don't want to have all of these conversations, period. It's just too many
Right.
conversations for me. So let me find somebody who, just like you said, is a compliment to me, someone I can learn from, but who can do the parts of management that don't energize me as an
Right.
introverted business owner.
Exactly. I think of my HR person. She it literally fills her cup to have difficult conversations, and she doesn't see it as.
It's
And
mind blowing.
I don't even know how that is possible, but it is.
Right. Like, are you
But
lying to me? What is this?
yeah, I'm like, how is that a thing? But
Mhm.
she loved, because she views it in this lens of, if someone's not performing, let's say, and she has to have this conversation, or if we have to let someone go and she's a part of that conversation, for her, she really embraces this idea that it's literally for the best of the employee, and that we're here to support them in finding a workplace that suits their skill set. And if that's not us, how can we support you in getting that? And
Yeah.
so for her, it's like a puzzle that she loves to kind of
Mhm.
figure out. Where I can have these conversations and I'm a part of these conversations, but it doesn't fill me up. And why put myself in that position
Yeah.
on a large scale with 50 people when I'd rather have that be what's in my sphere of having difficult
Mhm.
conversations comes with my leadership team and
Mhm.
the people immediately below me, so to speak, who I manage. But
Mhm.
then all 45 other people who those leadership teams members manage, all those conversations, are had with the leadership team.
Yeah. I think that is fantastic advice. I want to hear from you a little bit about what advice you have for the people listening who like what we're saying about hiring a leadership role to do most of this work, but they're not ready for that yet. So, right now, maybe they just have 3 or 4 employees. Maybe they have zero, but they're just imagining having 2, 3, 4 employees, can't afford to hire a leadership position yet. What are some tips you have for them to manage really effectively when it is just them and the employees?
Well, I guess my first thing is I'm going to just challenge that thought,
Mhm.
Because I hired my clinical director, who is in charge of my business essentially. 9 years later, she was my second hire. She became my clinical
Super early.
director at the third hire.
Mhm.
So she literally was a clinical director to my first employee, who's still with me, herself, and my third hire, who came like 2 weeks after her.
So your clinical director was a therapist who you promoted into the clinical director role?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
well,
a
there were
great
only
point.
3 people.
Mhm.
Yeah, 3 people,
Yes.
including her. So she really, literally only managed 2 people because she obviously wasn't managing me, and she didn't manage herself. So she was in charge of 2 people, and we got creative with it. It was a role that we both knew pretty early on was something that is part of her skill set and something that she wanted to be a part of as the business was growing. But it wasn't a full-time job. I didn't have enough people to need her to be a clinical director without doing anything else. So she was a full-time therapist, and initially she stepped into the role very part-time. So I think she did maybe 2 hours a week worth of clinical director stuff, where she was doing supervision, helping me with hiring. And as the business grew, we reduced her caseload and increased her leadership role to the point where we're at now, where she's all leadership. So I just want to challenge the initial thought of you that you have a very small business with 2 employees, that you can't have one of those 2 people or one of those 3 people be in a leadership position. I think, for someone who really wants to step into that position, they're willing to get creative with you and step into it at a very part-time level. This all or nothing thing where you're hiring someone fully as a leader, or you don't have the time, you don't have the finances or the time that's needed for it. You can have the middle ground, and that's what we did. So it was like 1 or 2 hours a week where she was really leading, and the rest was doing her other role. And as the years passed, that dynamic shifted. So I guess that would be my first thing, is to just challenge that. I think there's creative ways at getting support, even when you're small, when it comes to leadership.
I think that is a really helpful lens. I'm kind of curious, would you ever, I'm just thinking back to my first year, and like my first 3 hires were all provisionally licensed therapists. Would you, if you had a rock star provisionally licensed therapist, would you consider promoting them to a very part-time clinical director role, or do you have a firm line in the sand? It must be someone who is fully licensed and has been in the field for X amount of years.
I have a firm line in the sand with it. I know other people do it in other ways and have provisional therapists. I do fully licensed because the clinical director in my business is also providing supervision, which a provisionally licensed person can't offer yet.
Yeah.
But I guess it depends on the type of business you have. If it's someone who is more green in whatever business or role that they have, I'm not necessarily opposed to that, because I think life experience can be really helpful. Other types of job experience can be really helpful in the leadership realm. But when it comes specifically to the provisional stuff, I would rather hold off and look for someone who's fully licensed and has led people in some capacity. Because if not, you just have to make sure that you, as a business owner, have time to actually support that person's leadership growth.
Yeah.
And so, as an example, my clinical director did not have any previous leadership roles prior to getting into my group practice. And so she's been in executive coaching, weekly executive coaching, for a really long time.
And that's something that you've been providing for her.
I pay for it. I'm not giving it to her.
Yeah. The business is paying. Yeah. That's such a great way to think about it. Yeah. So if you have someone who you see they have leadership potential, but they need a little coaching, it doesn't necessarily have to be you. That's something the business could invest in at an early stage. Yeah. I like that you're giving people permission to really think about this in a flexible, creative way. If you have a real rock star provisionally licensed therapist and that's the only option on the table for you, get creative, figure out how to make that work. Otherwise, put some time and energy into looking for a fully licensed hire who has leadership experience, who's interested in joining your team to kind of, see clients, but also take on some leadership abilities and do it early in your group. I absolutely wish I would have done that earlier in my group practice. I'm sure 90% of group practice owners wish they would have hired someone to support them with leadership earlier in the process, especially as an introvert. So thank you for that
I
challenge
also
and
think
those suggestions.
I might have lucked out a little bit too, because I know most of us early in the hiring process don't quite know how to interview and hire appropriately and
Yeah.
make some mistakes initially. So
Oh,
I've
yeah.
seen some
Dozens.
business, yeah, I've seen some business owners who have kind of hastily brought on people into leadership
Mhm.
um, early on who haven't lasted very long. And I think a lot of that just comes with the just needing to practice interviewing. And that's, I guess, where I'll go back to this whole introvert and having difficult conversation thing is I do think it's a skill that's important to learn, even if you're hiring that position out, to practice it yourself. It kind of gives you perspective when you are hiring for that position, what it really entails and what that person needs. And if you don't practice that yourself, if you're not practicing having difficult conversations, maybe having let someone go yourself, it's really hard to know what you need to look for in that
Mhm.
hire.
Mhm.
So the introvert part of me, wants to say you can hire for this and you can, but I also think it's a good challenge for us as introverts to kind of walk the talk initially, at least, so that we know what we
Yeah.
need when we are bringing people into leadership who are doing that for us then.
Yeah. And like you said a minute ago, there are executive coaches. You
Yeah.
can work one on one with someone who can teach you how to do this, hold your hand through the process. I have worked with recruiters before, which has made the process a lot easier for me. But I've also learned a ton just by osmosis, watching them do their work and getting their support as, I'm interviewing people for higher level positions. So just yeah, remember that there are lots of folks outside of our space who specialize in helping people like us get good at these skills.
Mhm.
Maureen, do you have any favorite books that have really helped you personally learn how to be a manager?
Yeah, my favorite one was Radical Candor. I feel like
Mhm.
by Kim Scott. I feel like I reference that a lot years after reading it.
Yeah,
All of my
same.
leadership team members have read that book as well. It's something that I feel like it really helps give you perspective on the whole having difficult conversations piece
Mhm.
and learning how to come at it from not only a radically candid way versus through animosity, but also kind of teaches you to realize that difficult conversations can have a really positive like underlayment to it. And
Absolutely.
so I really like that book.
Which, as therapists, we know.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so, and I know not everyone listening to this conversation is a therapist, but for therapists specifically, y- we are so good at sitting in a therapy room and holding space for a really challenging conversation where we are saying really challenging things to the person in front of us, but take us out of the safety of the therapist role, put us in a more vulnerable role of manager, and it's like totally forget how to do that. So yeah, you recommended Radical Candor to me, and I'm so grateful for it because it is, for me, hands down, the management book that has made the most actionable difference in my day to day working life. So, yes, such a
Yeah,
great
it is a great one.
recommendation. Mhm.
I will also say The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni is a really good one as well. And I really like it because it's kind of different. So the first 75% of the book is a story, like a real story,
Mm.
about him coming into a business, and it's like a construction business, which I love too because we tend to read, and I don't know if it's similar for you, but I tend to read things or be surrounded by stories that relate directly to mental health,
Mm.
health care. And sometimes it's nice to get a business perspective that has
Mhm.
nothing to do with my industry because you just
Yeah.
learn a little bit that of information that you might not be normally getting from the type of people who are surrounding themselves with the same business that you have.
Mhm.
So what is really cool about that book is like 75% of the book is literally a story about him going into this construction business and having to learn about the different departments and teams and the communication that they have between each other and what's working and what's not, and why the business isn't doing as well as it can based off of the employees and the leadership that business owner was, the way that they were leading their employees. And then the last 25% of the book talks about the concept of the ideal team player, which is essentially being humble, hungry, and smart, and how you can, and it kind of weaves in the story of the different people in the different positions at this construction company, and whether or not they were hungry, humble, and smart, and how that, hiring people who are hungry to do their work and not just do the bare minimum, who are humble, right? And are team players, and who are smart, not in like street smarts or education smarts, but in people smarts, being able to read the room in the office, being able to know how to have conversations with teammates or their boss in an appropriate way. That's kind of what smart means. And it talks about how to grow your own interviewing skills as an employer, but you're bringing on people who are hungry, humble, and smart, which, as the introvert, you'll love. When you do this, you end up creating a better culture in your business, which means you're going to have less uncomfortable, negative conversations because you're engaging in a proactive process of hiring people who are going to be the best for your business.
That is so helpful. I'm going to add it to my Amazon list right after this call.
It's
Sounds
really
great.
good. And I remember that's why I said the first 75% is storytelling, because at first I was like, what does this I have to do with this?
Get to the point.
It's a really good story as you go through it. And then, like I said, that last 25% goes through the concepts, gives you interviewing questions to like weed out if someone's hungry, humble, and smart, how to work with current employees you might already have who maybe are lacking in one of those areas, how to kind of help them grow that skill, hunger or humility or the smarts piece. And what to do if you have someone who is lacking in all three. So it's a really good one.
Thanks for that recommendation, because this is so great. Yeah, I hope folks listening, whether you already have employees or you're thinking about it and feel really scared, feel like there are some tips here you can walk away with and implement. And just hearing from Maureen and myself as two introverts who both successfully work with employees and don't end every day wanting to pull the hair out of our head, this is manageable. And if you do have a mission that you feel really passionate about manifesting in the world, you have this work you want to do in your communities. For some people with some business models, hiring employees who can deliver these services is one of the best ways to expand the reach that you can have to make a difference in the world. So it is worth trying on to see if it's the right fit for you.
It's literally why I did this.
Yeah.
Was not because I wanted to, because I did not. My goal in life was to work alone. If I could paint in a studio alone and then like slide my pictures under a door and someone takes it and just sells it, like in my introverted world, that would be my best life, I feel like.
Yeah.
But and my mom and I have these conversations at how crazy it is that me, the anxious introvert, chose to have this kind of these businesses where I have a ton of visibility. I'm constantly needed, where there's so many people surrounding me. And, it's just, it in a way doesn't make sense, but you can definitely make it work. And I always go back to having all these employees helps me further my mission in a way that just me, myself, and I can't do.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like you really do have to be connected to a mission and a passion as an introvert in order for this model to be energizing for you. You have to be connected to some larger purpose. If you're not, if you're just doing a group practice to get rich, you're probably going to hate yourself and your business and every person who works for you, and you're going to burn out in a really big way.
I was going to say, you're going to burn out. You're going to have high turnover. You're going to have unhappy employees. They're going to be able to sense it. If you don't have a passion for it and you're doing it just as a way to grow income only, although you should be growing income if you have this. But if
Mhm.
that's your sole thing, it's not going to work long term.
Well, in group practices, especially in their smaller iterations, like less than 10 employees, are not the most profitable businesses, right? It's like the profit margin is not huge. So if you're doing it because, yeah, you want to make a massive amount of money, like this isn't the right business model for you. But if you're deeply connected to a purpose and you are willing to grow the business to whatever point it needs to get to for you to be financially where you need to be as the business owner, all of the skills you need to make that possible are totally learnable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I am not a natural leader,
yeah,
and I am here now.
that's right.
So,
Yeah, you're here now with 60 employees and a
yeah.
thriving group practice.
Yeah. And I feel like my husband always says I'm Maureen 2.0, like having,
Oh, that's nice.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm always like, what do you mean by this? But part of it is how I've grown to be more confident as a person
Mhm.
by having these businesses and having to like be pushed on a
Yeah.
personal level to having conversations like this, making
Yeah.
difficult decisions. It's really helped me grow outside of, my little box that I felt safe in, just not in the business sense, but even in the personal sense.
Mhm.
I've been able to speak up and speak out on
Yeah.
things that normally I would just stay quiet on because I don't like conflict. And so he's always like, look at Maureen 2.0. This is just across the years of us being together. He said, you're
Mhm.
such a different person in a good way
Yeah.
because of this. So,
Thanks for saying that, Maureen. I agree with you. I think some of the most profound growth I've experienced as a person has been in response to the things that are happening in my business with my employees. And maybe that's like another pro tip we can throw out. Have your own therapist. If you're a
yeah.
group practice owner, like be connected with your own therapist so that you have a space that where you can go and process, wait, this stuff is showing up in the group. Like what of this is really my stuff from the past? And how can I just untangle what's my stuff from, what are management skills that I just need to learn? There's so much space for self-discovery as
Yeah.
a manager of employees. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I actually, as you were saying that, I was thinking all of the time that I'm getting support is pretty. I prioritize a ton of time in my own growth and learning. So I know I mentioned the reading part, but I have
Mhm.
my own one-on-one therapist every week. My husband and I, we do couples therapy every week.
Mhm.
I have an anti-racism coach every week. I do anti-racism group coaching once or twice a month. I'm a part of a book club that
Mhm.
we meet every week. Like I have a speaking coach every week. All of this is in response to stuff that happens in the business where I've realized, oh my gosh, I need to do better, or I need
Right.
to grow in that a little bit more. And so,
Mhm.
like I mentioned when we first started, prioritizing time to just learn or
Yeah.
read or whatever it is, I have so, many of my hours now are just dedicated to my own growth.
Which is so fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. And I think that's such a great seed to plant, especially for people who are in the earlier stages. As your business grows, you need to have more white space on your calendar, not less. If your business is growing and your calendar is looking more and more chaotic, you are moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So it's what you're saying. The bigger you get, the more white space you need to do all of these things. Because if
Hmm.
you want to be an intentional leader, you have to be tending to yourself and developing yourself in whatever way is necessary.
Yeah.
It's so dreamy. And just as an introvert and as, people who are entrepreneurial, more visionary, um, we love that. That's like our favorite space, right? That space where we're connecting one-on-one with people, we're learning, we're being creative. Like that's the dream. That's the vision. One book I'll throw into the ring too that I'm actually in the middle of right now is called Rocket Fuel. Have you heard of this?
No.
It is about the as your business grows, the need to have a team of leaders, one person who's more of the visionary, which is almost always the business owner and the person who started the business, and an integrator. which is a person who isn't so visionary, but is just really good at implementation and really good at connecting a team and really good at managing people. And I'm really liking that framework. Is like what the lifestyle you were describing, Maureen, in my mind is the visionary lifestyle.
Yep.
And if you don't have an integrator or a solid team of people who can implement the vision you have for your business, you're not going to have the space to do that kind of visionary type of work. So just another book suggestion to throw into the ring. It's really good. I'm enjoying it.
I have an integrator in the group practice exchange business. I have an integrator who's in charge of just making sure everything is going where it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
But with my group practice, I have like leadership teams. So they're essentially in my many integrators in a way.
Right. Yeah. It might be a collective integration team. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about maintaining work-life balance as a manager. I think a lot of the tips that you've shared already sort of funnel into how do you create a business that allows you to have good boundaries and step away. But yeah, what are your biggest pieces of advice when it comes to maintaining autonomy and strong boundaries around yourself personally as your team gets bigger and bigger?
Yeah. I think the thing that's helped me the most is having a like a leadership support person, whether that's the practice manager or clinical director or supervisor or, someone else that can step in. And that might not be someone that you have, consistently as a leader, especially if you're first starting off, and investing in someone who is in charge is something you can't do. There's creative ways to kind of move around this, which is having someone who might have been in your business a little bit longer and knows how your business works on a general level, right? Like if you have a therapy practice, they know how to answer the phone for you and schedule an appointment if they needed to. A therapist maybe who can do that. And so a creative way, if you don't have someone who's in leadership, is to, when you're taking time off, whether that's on the weekends consistently, whether that's just when you take a week vacation or whatever, is to like hand your role off temporarily to someone else and say, if people have questions, have them just reach out to you. And so that's a great way to kind of get that done when you might not be able to hire someone full time.
Yeah.
Right. And what's worked for me, because I can get into the weeds of just answering my calls, looking at my email,
doing all the things,
is I will send an email to my leadership team, or before I even had a leadership team, just to my staff, and I will throw it out there. It's like accountability, saying I am not going to be in the office starting next Monday through Friday. If the building is burning, you can contact, and I'm very clear, like, here's when you can contact me. Otherwise, you can send emails, but I'm not going to look at it. If you need support, here's who to go to. And unless X, Y, and Z are happening, don't contact me. And they know me well enough to know I, usually have something joking, because I'm very down to earth. Like, me, I will work even when I'm not supposed to, and I really want to take this week off. So try to hold it in, try to, figure it out on your own.
I love the transparency.
Yeah. And I'll say, these are the reasons why you can totally contact me. Because, obviously I have some employees who hold that boundary so firm that, like, shit will hit the fan and they won't contact me. Yeah. I usually will, say, if this, and this are happening, totally.
Please let me know. Yeah.
Otherwise, don't. And I will see you on Friday, and, feel free to bombard me on that day then. And that really has helped people, for the most part, appreciate that, because then they know it's also good modeling for your team, because then they know they are allowed to also take time off without expecting them to be kind of on call all the time.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love the transparency. I think what a different place our entire world would be if we all showed up with this authenticity and said, this is hard for me. I know I need to step away. Can I get your support in taking this time for myself? And when I think about the culture of the company that you are creating, knowing that that is the message that's being circulated feels it just feels like a lot of counter conditioning to capitalism and the patriarchy and all of these systems that can really hold us back from taking really good care of ourselves. So I appreciate you saying that here.
Yeah.
And I hope we all do that in our own ways.
I think another simple thing to do is your autoresponder on your
Mhm.
email or on your voicemail. My financial planner kind of got me in this. She has really fun autoresponders when she's gone that says, I'm probably running around the pool after my kid with a martini in my hand right now. So I'll
Mhm.
get back to you. I'm,
Mhm.
gone.
Adding in
And
some levity.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I remember reading that when I sent her an email being like, oh my gosh, that's so fun. And it totally reduced any expectations I had of whatever thing I was wanting from her, thinking, "Go you. I hope you're
Mhm.
holding that martini, running around chasing your kid around the pool." And so, even having a fun sort of autoresponder that almost eases any anxieties or tensions or stress that whoever's emailing you might be having, that can be done through an autoresponder like that. And then even giving some tips like, hey, if you're struggling with this or if this is an area that you're needing help with right now, like go to this person or go to this web page. Maybe having frequently asked questions kind of just answered right in the autoresponder, even are just simple ways to help people feel supported when you're off.
And I think remembering if this feels super scary and overwhelming to you, start small. Start with
Mhm.
24 hours,
Yeah.
and then do a 3-day weekend and then
Yeah.
do 4 days, then do 5 days and give yourself and your team time to adapt to functioning without you there, especially if you have really conditioned them
Yeah.
that you're always available. Right. And I think
And
there's
I
self
think it's like a
ownership
bad thing
too.
for the business, right? Like
Absolutely.
if the business only can survive when you're there, you're setting your business up for failure because what if something happens to you?
Yeah.
All your employees, their jobs would fall apart because you're not there. I
Yeah.
know there's some ego in all of this with us needing to feel important as business owners and what does it mean to our teams if our business can run completely without us? Like what
Mhm.
will they think of us? And it's all stuff we can work on ourselves, to be okay with
Mhm.
that. I'm at this place where when it comes to like time off and boundaries and enjoying life and being able to spend time with my kids and not having this, like you said, capitalism just showing up in my thinking of I need to be working 60 hours a week and really earning every dollar I
Mhm.
make. Otherwise, I'm not truly earning it. I, have really stepped away from that and thought about this whole idea. And I think Mike McCallich's book Clockwork was where I got this from is if your business can't survive even a weekend without you, like you should be able to get a business that can survive a month without you. And that's the goal of
Absolutely.
Clockwork is being able to take a
Mhm.
month vacation. And so he mentioned starting off small and do a weekend, do one full day and see what falls apart. It'll give you a sense of where you
Yeah.
need to work with your
It's a
team.
great experiment.
It is.
And what's the point of being a business owner if you can't step away and enjoy your life? Like you could go work
Right.
somewhere else and have way better boundaries.
Right. Exactly. I think
Doesn't make
about my
sense.
employees and I want when they're not at work, I want them not to be thinking about work.
Absolutely.
Having hobbies, doing things with their families, whatever,
Yeah.
vacationing, reading, doing
Yeah,
their
that's
thing.
the benefit of working for me,
Yeah.
right? It's is that you can do that. You can totally step away, but it doesn't mean that I then have to, as the business owner, absorb like okay, well since I'm letting them have boundaries, I can't have no boundaries. It's like no, no, no.
Right.
If that's happening, it's there's something broken in
Yeah.
your system. I'm really glad that we're ending on this note because I think this is the vision that scares people away from hiring employees. Like this is what feels terrifying. And there's many more fears, of course, but these are some of the core pieces. And yeah, like that could be the reality. Totally.
Yeah.
It is the reality for many people. And that's why their businesses don't last. But it doesn't have to go that way. And Maureen, you are such a stellar example of someone who has stayed true to your needs and your values and created a business that allows you to thrive and allows the people who work for you to thrive. It's so achievable. And I feel really grateful that you came here today to share all of this wisdom with us.
I appreciate you having me on. I had a good time.
Well, I would love to ask you one more question before we
Okay.
wrap up, which is a bit more personal. I want to know how you, Maureen, personally know when it's time for you to take a break from your business, when you are getting close to burnout. And when you do take a break, what are your favorite ways to rest?
Yes. So, I notice it's time when I become a little hyperactive and
Mm,
anxious, more so than normal. So I have ADHD and anxiety. I naturally run anxious.
mhm.
And with me, that means I'm always thinking I don't rest very well, even though I have a lot of time off. I use my time off to like literally just find something else to do. And so
Mhm.
I end up being a person that does a lot of projects and doesn't like to sit still. And I notice that that goes on overdrive when I'm getting close to burnout. It's almost like my body pushes me to burnout because it
Yeah.
knows when I get to that place, I'll just then rest.
Yeah.
And so, um, my when I read my body, I feel much more anxious when I'm
Mhm.
getting close to burnout, and I'm
Mhm.
noticing myself like coming up with more ideas and
Mhm.
projects. So it
Mhm.
feels like a positive thing, but to me, it's
Mm.
like this mental note of, dude, you need to calm down a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's what I watch out for with myself.
Mhm.
And what I do is I go for walks every day and get my Starbucks. So here's my morning walk to Starbucks
Nice.
before this meeting. That is a place where I listen to my music. I don't do any work, and it's like the way I set my kind of day.
Mhm.
And on weekends, I really try to take off completely from work and go to. We have a house up in Michigan that's like on Lake Michigan,
Mm.
and it's like has horrible internet. It has horrible cell
Perfect.
service. Yeah, it's like forced. At first, it really made me upset because I thought, oh, this would be a great like workcation place.
Uh-huh.
This is how my brain thinks,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it become like this
A rest
blessing in
place.
disguise because I can't
Yeah.
work up there. And so we go up there, and my body it initially, as soon as I get there, goes into relax mode. So that's kind of what I do. That reading is really helpful because it gets my busy ADHD brain continuing to go while also letting my body relax. I feel
Mm.
like I'm learning and doing, but also not
Mhm.
doing.
Mhm.
And then binge watching TV shows.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's my favorite too. That's the low hanging fruit, right?
that is
Netflix is the low
definitely the
hanging
low
fruit.
hanging. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate you sharing about the anxiety and ADHD because I imagine so many people listening can connect to that. And I just want to name that. I think this shows up for lots of us in different ways that when we start suffering, the self criticism, the internalized capitalism kicks into gear, and our brain starts saying, you need to be doing more,
Yep.
right? You need to be more productive. You need more ideas. And I think it's collectively, if we can just start naming that as that's internalized capitalism, right?
Hmm.
Instead, we're not conditioned to feel that and to go, oh, I need to rest. We
Yep.
feel that insecurity, we feel that discomfort, and we go, oh, I need to do more. And that's a bunch of bullshit. So
It's
I,
so much capitalism that flows around, and every
ooh,
day I learn more and more about
yeah,
how it shows up in my own life and in my own
it's
way of
profound.
business. Yep.
Yeah, it is profound. And I think
Hmm.
this practice that you're describing, I just want to invite all of us to join you in this practice when you feel yourself moving to exhausted productivity, pausing and instead choosing rest. And I agree when I'm in that place where the anxiety is high, and the ideas are like anxiously coursing through my veins and I can feel I'm nearing burnout. I have to take myself away from my home, often to a place that has really poor Wi-Fi because it's like my self-control in that state of mind is it's pathetic. It's like it's
Yeah.
not good. So I think it's actually a really brilliant strategy. Like just go to a cabin in the woods and
Yeah.
be in nature, force yourself to decompress. Yeah, let's do
And I
that.
want to say, like, I always feel like people think I have this all figured out and that I have it all perfectly, I have the best work life balance. I have the best mindset and I have the best boundaries. And there, in so many ways, I don't. I know how to get there when I
Yes.
notice it. And that's, I think, kind of the real part of all of this is that We all have these struggles. We're not going to get to this place where we're perfectly boundaried and resting. The balance of work and life are where we're supposed to be. For me, I've just found that my best version of myself is acknowledging that when my anxiety and ADHD are at overdrive, that I can recognize it soon enough and do what I need to do to combat that so that I don't continue to run on overdrive. But yeah, those things definitely show up
Of
every couple
course.
months for me.
Well, they're so human, and
Mhm.
when I get into that black or white thinking of like I'm doing a good job or I'm doing a bad job, my therapist actually will often reflect back to me. Remember, your rest is a practice. I'm
Yep.
like, oh, right, okay, rest, avoiding burnout, taking care of myself. They're practices, just like you meditate or you exercise as a practice. Sometimes you're consistent and it comes easily. Sometimes you're not consistent and it feels really hard. So I couldn't agree more. And thank you for that beautiful normalization here at the end of our conversation. Maureen, thank you. You have shared so much wisdom. And I think, no, you don't have it all figured out. Who does? But you have figured a lot out and you have so much to offer the clients that you support. So, on that note, I would love to tell people about the Exchange, which is your membership community for group practice owners. Owners from the startup phase all the way to well-established group practice owners. The membership includes resources, including monthly Q&As, live webinars, a library of courses and trainings, accountability groups, and all the documents you could possibly need to get your business streamlined and functioning, hopefully without you there, at least
Yeah.
sometimes. And you are giving a discount code to the Rest and Success Code listeners, $20 off your first month of membership in the Exchange. And we are going to include the link that you need and the coupon code in all of our communication to you. So that's going to be easily accessible. I highly recommend that you join the Exchange and gain access to more of Maureen's brilliance. Maureen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
If you are feeling inspired and want to learn more about leadership for Maureen, I absolutely recommend checking out her ebook, The Accountability Equation. The link to purchase her book is thegrouppracticeexchange.com/a ebook. Again, that's thegrouppracticeexchange.com/a ebook. The link's in the show notes, along with all of the other resources from today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to talk to you again next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Deeply Rested. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love to invite you to join the Deeply Rested weekly newsletter. You can sign up at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. I hope to meet you in my inbox very soon.